Okay, this recording is to show the OIC3 feature for the OCI function invocation. So I'll walk you through what exactly is happening here, and then also show where specifically we've added feature functionality for OCI functions. So let's start. We will first click on create. This is an application or rather application orchestration type of invocation, and we name it as zip files. So very straightforward. We will have a REST trigger. This REST trigger is essentially, sort of emulating an invocation from external application. In our case, when we test, it will be the OIC test console. So we just provide the relative resource URL. This is the /zip files action that will be invoked on OIC3. We will add some parameters and we expect a response to be sent back. So the parameters here are actually coming from the documentation of OCI function. This is a pre-built function. This function takes files from a given bucket and then zips it up and puts it into another folder or another bucket on OCI storage. So these are the parameters that we need to specify: the compartment ID, the region where this is executing, the source bucket, and the files, the source files. We also specify what is the target bucket, and then whether we want to allow overwrites or not. So these are the parameters that we will accept from as part of the invocation to the OIC orchestration, and you will see this later, when we actually execute this. So once we have added all these request parameters, what we're going to do next is, of course, introspect this particular function. But before we do that, we also need to provide response type, and that response type is going to be the output from the OCI function. So this is again well documented, and we are just going to copy paste the target data or the data that we got from the documentation. So we continue. This is our trigger that is done now. So we are now ready to do the actual invocation of the object store. So we add a new action. This is available on the palette. We pick it up from the palette itself, and we just provide it a name as to what we want to call this particular endpoint. So we are going to call this zip files in bucket. We need to point to the region. So in our case, it's US Phoenix 1. And then the compartment is OSW23. This is a demo app that is part of the OCI function creation. And that zip files is the actual function. Now, the OCI function itself requires input and output. So this is the input. Again, this is part of the documentation. So we are just copy pasting the input, that is provided or that is going to be used by the OCI function. So we just copy paste that. And then similarly, the output is again from documentation. Once the function executes, this will contain the response JSON object from the OCI function. So we put that in. So what we saw over here is OIC3 has the the functions capability, where you can provide the function or introspect the function, provide input and output. The next thing that we do is we map the source and the target. Now this is being done for the parameters that the client application will send to OIC integration, right? So whatever data we are collecting from the client application is being mapped over here to the same elements in the functions parameter. So this, once it is done, we will next do the mapping for the response, and that is again going to be very similar. Whatever response comes from the OCI function, we are just going to map it back to the response that the OIC integration, this particular integration, will send back to the client. So we open up the appropriate response data structures or payloads and then do the mapping appropriately. So this is, again, this is dependent on what the function has been coded for, what is the input it takes, which is what we saw earlier, and what's the output that it sends back. Once we have done that, we validate and we go back to our integration. So this is now ready. All we need to do now is to specify or add the business identifier. So in this case, what we are going to do is we are going to open up the query parameters and we'll take the source bucket and target bucket as the identifiers. This can be anything. There is no hard and fast rule, as you're probably aware. And once we've done that, we can now go ahead and activate this particular integration. So we'll set a debug since this is just for demo. And then this gets deployed. We can just check the status. So it's active now. We go ahead and click on run. And the OIC test console will come up here. As you can see here, we've already filled all the input parameters that we saw earlier. And this is the OCW23 demo bucket. That's the source. This is the target bucket. The target bucket doesn't have any files at this moment. And we go back to our integration where we've already entered all this data. Source files is /, which will mean take all files from that folder. We are running now this particular integration, so it'll take a little bit of time, but this is now successful. We can see the output that has come from the function. And if we refresh here, we will see that our interaction or integration is completed successfully. We go back to target bucket, which was empty. And now when we refresh it, you will see that it contains a new zip file, which actually contains all the source files from the source bucket. So that's about it. Thanks for watching and listening. I hope this was useful to you.